She held her dying baby in her arms, called 911, and begged for help. 17 years later, she was still in prison for his murder. But he wasn't murdered. He died of SIDS. And the doctors who testified against her, they were wrong about everything. This is the story of how outdated medical science destroyed an innocent mother's life. And by the time anyone realized the mistake, she'd already lost nearly 2 decades. What happened to her has happened to dozens of other mothers, and some of them are still locked up right now. In 1989, she was 24 years old, married, and living in a small apartment in Texas. She'd just had her second child, a baby boy, 7 months old. Healthy pregnancy, normal delivery, no complications. She was a stay-at-home mom. Her husband worked in construction. They were barely making rent, but they were happy. She had no criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. On the morning of November 11th, she woke up early to feed the baby. He seemed fine, a little fussy, but nothing unusual. She put him down for his morning nap around 9 a.m. At 10:30, she went to check on him. He wasn't breathing. She screamed. She picked him up. His body was limp. She ran to the phone, dialed 911, and started CPR the way she'd learned in a parenting class. The operator stayed on the line, walking her through compressions. Her voice on that 911 call, you can hear the terror. She's begging them to hurry. Paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. They took over. They rushed him to the hospital. 40 minutes later, a doctor came out and told her what no parent should ever hear. Her son was dead. She collapsed. Her husband held her. They were destroyed. But then, 3 hours later, 2 police detectives walked into the waiting room and asked her to come down to the station to answer some questions. She thought it was routine. She went willingly. They separated her from her husband. They put her in an interrogation room. And that's when everything changed. The detectives told her the hospital had found bruises on the baby's body. Small bruises on his chest, his arms. They said the doctor suspected trauma. They asked her what happened. She said she didn't know. She found him not breathing. She did CPR. Maybe the bruises came from that. They didn't believe her. They asked her again and again. For 4 hours, they asked her the same questions in different ways. Did you shake him? Did you drop him? Did you get frustrated? She kept saying no. She kept saying she didn't do anything. She asked for a lawyer. They told her innocent people don't need lawyers. Finally, they let her go home. But 2 days later, at her son's funeral, they arrested her. The charge was capital murder. At trial, the prosecution's entire case rested on medical testimony. 3 doctors took the stand: a forensic pathologist, a pediatrician, an emergency room physician. All 3 said the same thing. The bruising pattern was consistent with abuse. The baby had small hemorrhages in his eyes, which they said only happened from violent shaking. They called it shaken baby syndrome. One doctor testified that SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, doesn't leave bruises. Another said the injuries could only have been caused by someone deliberately harming the child. The prosecution argued she snapped. Maybe the baby was crying. Maybe she was sleep deprived. Maybe she shook him to make him stop. They painted her as a frustrated young mother who lost control for just a few seconds and killed her own child. Her defense attorney tried to argue there was no motive, no history of abuse, no witnesses, no confession. But he didn't have medical experts to counter the prosecution's doctors. He couldn't afford them. She couldn't afford them. So, the jury heard one side, the medical side, the scientific side, and the science said she was guilty. It took the jury 3 hours to convict her. The judge sentenced her to 30 years. She gave birth to her second child in prison. She was 7 months pregnant when she was arrested. Her daughter was born in a prison hospital, and she got to hold her for 2 hours before they took her away. Her husband raised both kids alone. He believed she was innocent. Then he visited every week for the first 3 years. But the money ran out. The travel got harder. The kids needed stability. Eventually, the visits stopped. She didn't blame him. Inside, she was placed in the general population. Other inmates found out what she was convicted of. Baby killer. She was attacked twice in the first year. She requested protective custody. They moved her to a different unit. She spent 23 hours a day in a cell. She wrote letters to lawyers, to advocacy groups, to anyone who might listen. Most never wrote back. She filed appeals. They were denied. Her case wasn't unusual. There was no new evidence, just her word against the medical experts. And in a court of law, medical experts win. Years passed. Her daughter turned 5, then 10, then 15. She missed every birthday, every first day of school, every moment. Her son would have been 18. She thought about him every single day. Then in 2004, 15 years into her sentence, something shifted in the medical community. Researchers started questioning shaken baby syndrome. Studies came out showing that the symptoms doctors had attributed to abuse, the brain bleeding, the eye hemorrhages, the subdural hematomas, could also be caused by short falls, by medical conditions, by birth trauma, or even by CPR. A landmark paper published in a pediatric journal challenged the whole diagnosis. It said the triad of symptoms, bleeding, swelling, and retinal hemorrhaging wasn't proof of abuse. It was just proof of injury, and injury has multiple causes. Lawyers started paying attention. Innocence projects started reviewing old cases. And in 2006, a legal clinic at a university took her case. They brought in new medical experts. A neuropathologist reviewed the autopsy report and said the findings were consistent with SIDS. A biomechanical engineer testified that CPR, especially aggressive CPR done by a panicked parent, could absolutely cause bruising. A pediatric forensic specialist said the original doctors had used outdated science and made conclusions that weren't supported by the evidence. The new experts didn't just poke holes in the state's case, they dismantled it. Her lawyers filed a motion for a new trial based on updated science. The state fought it. The original prosecutors, even though some had retired, argued that the conviction was sound, that these new experts were just hired guns trying to rewrite history. The case went back and forth for 2 years. Hearings, depositions, more medical testimony. In 2008, a judge finally ruled that the new scientific evidence was credible and substantial enough to warrant reconsideration. But that didn't mean she walked free. It meant she got a new trial. The district attorney had a choice: retry her with the new science, which would be almost impossible to win, or drop the charges. They took 8 months to decide. During those 8 months, she waited in the same cell she'd been in for 16 years. Finally, in March 2009, the DA's office released a statement. They were dismissing the charges, not because they believed she was innocent, but because they could no longer prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. On March 19, 2009, she walked out of prison. She was 41 years old. She went in at 24. She'd spent 17 years inside for a crime that never happened. Her daughter, in whom she'd held for 2 hours as a newborn, was now 16. They were strangers. Her husband had remarried, her parents had aged, her friends had moved on. The state of Texas gave her $75 and a bus ticket. No apology, no compensation, no acknowledgement that they had destroyed her life. She stayed with her sister for the first few months. She didn't know how to use a smartphone. She didn't know how to apply for jobs online. She had a felony conviction on her record, even though the charges were dismissed, and it showed up on every background check. She couldn't find work. She couldn't afford therapy. She struggled with depression, with anger, with grief for a son she never got to bury properly, and a daughter she never got to raise. 3 years later, Texas passed a law allowing wrongfully convicted individuals to seek compensation. She applied. The state fought it, arguing that a dismissal wasn't the same as an exoneration. It took another 4 years and a team of pro bono lawyers before she was officially declared innocent. In 2016, she was awarded $1.4 million, $80,000 for every year she spent in prison, before taxes. It sounds like a lot, but it doesn't buy back 17 years. It doesn't give her back her son's childhood, or her daughter's. It doesn't undo the trauma. The 3 doctors who testified against her, one retired, one still practices. One has testified in dozens of other shaken baby syndrome cases, some of which are now being questioned. None of them was disciplined. None of them apologized. The prosecutors who called her a baby killer in front of a jury, they moved on to other cases. The system that convicted her didn't change. It just moved forward. Her case isn't unique. Since the 1990s, over 30 mothers have been exonerated after being convicted of killing their children based on shaken baby syndrome and other now debunked medical theories. Some served 5 years. Some served 20. Some are still in prison right now, waiting for lawyers to take their cases, waiting for courts to reconsider the science. The National Registry of Exonerations lists more than 70 cases where faulty forensic science, from bite marks to arson analysis to blood spatter, led to wrongful convictions. And those are just the ones we know about. The ones where someone fought hard enough, had resources enough, might got lucky enough to prove their innocence. How many others are still inside, convicted on science that's been disproven, waiting for someone to notice? She lost 17 years because doctors were certain about something they didn't fully understand. She lost her son. She lost her daughter's childhood. She lost herself. And when the truth finally came out, the people who put her there just walked away. Which wrongful conviction case should I cover next? Drop it in the comments. And if you want to see how this keeps happening, I've got another case coming tomorrow, where outdated forensic science destroyed another innocent person's life.